Welcome to Danger, the channel where we dive into the world's most chilling true crime stories. Please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can get notified every time we post something. Today's case is one of the most heartbreaking and disturbing true crime stories to come out of Milwaukee in recent years, the tragic murder of 19-year-old Sade Robinson, a young college student whose life was brutally taken after what should have been a normal first date. Sade Carlina Robinson was born on May 10, 2004, and she had her whole future ahead of her. She was described by everyone who knew her as ambitious, confident, hardworking, and full of energy. She was attending Milwaukee Area Technical College, where she was studying criminal justice, and she hoped to build a career helping others and creating a better life for herself. Friends said she had a strong personality, a beautiful smile, and a love for life that made people naturally gravitate toward her. She also worked while attending school, balancing responsibilities like many young adults trying to make something of themselves. She was especially close with her family and friends, and they all described her as someone who was focused, independent, and determined to succeed. One detail people often remembered about Sade was her love for the color pink. It was her favorite color, and after her death, pink became a symbol used by the community to honor her memory. On April 1, 2024, Sade went on what would sadly become the last night of her life. She had arranged a first date with 33-year-old Maxwell Anderson, a man she had reportedly met online. The two planned to meet for dinner at a seafood restaurant in Milwaukee where Anderson had previously worked. According to investigators, surveillance cameras captured them together that evening, confirming that they had met as planned. After dinner, prosecutors said the two went to a downtown bar and spent more time together before eventually heading back to Anderson's home. At the time, no one could have imagined that this simple first date would end in tragedy. That night would be the last confirmed time Sade was seen alive. The next day, April 2nd, concern began to grow quickly. Sade failed to show up for work, which was highly unusual for her. Friends and family immediately knew something was wrong because Sade was responsible and dependable. She would never simply disappear without letting someone know. A close friend used the Life 360 location sharing app they both had and noticed something disturbing. Sade's phone had last shown movement near Warnemont Park in Cudahy, Wisconsin, during the early morning hours. Around 4:30 a.m. that location immediately raised concern because it made no sense for Sade to be there at that time. Her family officially reported her missing, and what started as a missing person case quickly turned into something much darker. Later that same day, a passerby walking near the shoreline at Warnemont Park made a horrifying discovery: a severed human leg near the water. Police responded immediately, and investigators began processing the scene. Very quickly, evidence began pointing toward the remains belonging to Sade Robinson. DNA testing later confirmed it. The discovery shocked the entire community. At nearly the same time, police located Sade's burned Honda Civic. Her car had been found set on fire in another area, and investigators believed it had been intentionally burned in an attempt to destroy evidence. Now, detectives were no longer looking at a missing person case. They were investigating a brutal homicide. As police worked to reconstruct Sade's final hours, Maxwell Anderson became the primary suspect almost immediately. He was the last known person to see her alive. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and digital evidence reportedly placed him near multiple key locations connected to the crime. Investigators tracked his movements and found patterns that prosecutors later argued showed planning, concealment, and attempts to cover up what had happened. Authorities also searched Anderson's home, where prosecutors said they found disturbing evidence connected to the case. Court documents later suggested investigators discovered suspicious items in the basement and evidence that supported the theory that Sade had been killed there. The details were deeply disturbing. On April 4, 2024, Maxwell Anderson was arrested during a traffic stop. Then, on April 12, prosecutors formally charged him with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and arson. Later, an additional charge of hiding a corpse was added. According to prosecutors, after killing Sade, Anderson dismembered her body and scattered her remains across several locations in Milwaukee County and along Lake Michigan in an effort to prevent her from being fully recovered and to destroy evidence. As the investigation continued, more remains were discovered. On April 18, investigators found a torso and an arm along the shoreline of Lake Michigan in South Milwaukee. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to Sade. Then, weeks later, another arm washed ashore much farther away, in Waukegan, Illinois, along the Lake Michigan shoreline. That arm was also identified as Sade's. The fact that parts of her body were found across such distant locations made the case even more horrifying and showed the extent of the effort to hide the crime. Tragically, not all of Sade's remains were ever recovered. For her family, that pain was unbearable. Not only had they lost someone they loved, but they were also forced to endure the unimaginable trauma of learning the details piece by piece. As more information became public, the Milwaukee community rallied around Sade's family. People across the city were devastated by what had happened. Community members organized vigils, memorial walks, and gatherings in her honor. Because pink was Sade's favorite color, supporters wore pink, released pink balloons, brought pink flowers, and created memorial displays filled with stuffed animals, candles, and handwritten messages. A large memorial was created near Anderson's home, turning the area into a visible reminder that Sade would not be forgotten. Later, a mural of Sade was painted near Pizza Shuttle, the restaurant where she had worked. The mural became a place where people could stop, reflect, and remember the young woman whose life had been stolen far too soon. Her case also sparked larger conversations online and in the media about dating safety, violence against women, and how vulnerable young women can be when meeting people for the first time. Many people saw themselves in Sade, a young woman simply trying to enjoy life, go on a date, and continue building her future. In May 2025, more than a year after Sade disappeared, Maxwell Anderson's murder trial officially began. Prosecutors laid out a chilling timeline for the jury. They argued that the evidence would show Anderson had brutally and callously killed Sade after their first date, then went to extreme lengths to cover it up. They presented surveillance footage from the restaurant and bar, cell phone location data, witness testimony, and evidence tying Sade to Anderson's home. The prosecution argued that the combination of digital evidence and physical evidence painted a clear picture of guilt. The defense, however, argued that there was no direct DNA evidence proving Anderson committed the murder. They challenged the prosecution's timeline and tried to create doubt around the exact sequence of events, but prosecutors maintained that the totality of the evidence left little room for any other conclusion. After days of testimony, emotional statements, and evidence presentation, the jury began deliberations. In June 2025, the verdict was finally delivered. Maxwell Anderson was found guilty on all counts: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, arson, and hiding a corpse. The courtroom was filled with emotion as the verdict was read. For Sade's family, nothing could bring her back, but the guilty verdict meant accountability. Prosecutors stated that Anderson had murdered Sade, dismembered her body, burned her car, and attempted to erase the evidence of what he had done. Because of the first-degree intentional homicide conviction, he faced a mandatory life sentence in prison. Sade Robinson's story became much more than a criminal case. It became a symbol of loss, justice, and remembrance. She was only 19 years old. She should have been finishing school, building her dreams, planning her future, and living the life she worked so hard for. Instead, her name became known across the country because of one horrific act of violence. Her family continues to honor her memory and fight to ensure she is remembered for who she was, not just for the tragedy of how she died. People continue to say her name because Sade Robinson mattered. She was loved, she was ambitious, she was someone's daughter, friend, co-worker, and future success story. And she deserved so much more time. Instead, her story became one of Milwaukee's most devastating and unforgettable true crime cases, a first date that ended in horror and a young woman whose life was stolen far too soon. And that is the tragic case of Sade Robinson. Let me know in the comments, What are your thoughts on this case? Thank you for watching. If you want more factual and respectful true crime content, please like, subscribe, and share. And as always, stay safe.